We've got week 10 for you here in the NFL. All the DFS talk on the Friday morning RotoWire Fantasy Football podcast, all coming up next. Happy Football Friday morning, everybody. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast, the Friday DFS version. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always on Friday mornings by Ryan Belongia. We are sponsored by No House Advantage. We appreciate their sponsorship during this season. Ryan, it's been a little crazy here. I had no funny quips for the intro, so I just kind of went boring. So I apologize for that. But how are you on this week 10? Packers fandom aside.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Packers fandom aside. I mean, I sort of forgot about the Packers a while ago. Season's over.
Sorry to open that wound.
Yeah, no, it's better that way, you know. DFS though, yeah, it went okay last week. You know, I've had Fields in just about everything, and obviously he had that historic game, but it was frustrating again because obviously I know you didn't have Joe Mixon either. I didn't have Joe Mixon. I mean, breaking the slate would be an understatement for what Mixon did. So, You know, it's frustrating when you get a lot of stuff right, but you just miss on one or two things. But still, yeah, going well. How about you?
Yeah, good. I felt like the slate was pretty good last week for what we talked about, aside from Joe Mixon. I just there were and it's funny, we'll talk about this week. This week is a very different slate, but there were so many running backs in that range that, you know, I liked Mixon. We talked about it. I liked Mixon's spot, but I just didn't like how he was playing. Didn't like the Bengals that week before, and there were just so many options. If it was like this week, like Joe Mixon at 6,500 would stick out like a sore thumb, but there were so many guys to play last week that I missed on Mixon too. And he has 48 points in the first half. That's a tough one. It's a tough one to overcome. So. But let's jump into this slate. It's interesting. We only have 10 games on the slate. We have some teams on bye. We have obviously the primetime games. We have a London game again this week. The Seahawks and Bucks there. So we got 10 games on the slate, 7 early, 3 late. The 4 teams on bye are Cincinnati. Joe Mixon has a much-needed week off. The Patriots, the Jets, and the Ravens. Primetime, we had the thrilling Falcons-Panthers game last night, which was obviously not thrilling. We got Seahawks-Buccaneers in Germany. Niners Chargers on Sunday night, so I can't play any Niners this week, and Washington and Philly on Monday night. But the first thing that stuck out to me this game, I know we jump into totals right away, but it's crazy. We've talked for like 3 weeks in a row how there are 5, 6, 7 running backs in the 6,000 range that we can play. Like there's so many guys, just play back and forth. They're all really good. Just pick which ones you want. The mid-range running back is gone. They're either on buys or they've been priced up or they're in bad matchups. It's just there's no 6,000. We'll talk about some, but like that glut of value plays, it's gone. You've got to build differently this week.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. That's the first thing that stuck out to me as well. We've been spoiled with running backs to choose from every week. Just running backs in great spots. Yeah, you mentioned it. There's really not much under 7K. One guy who we'll talk about later. It's not even like the greatest spot, but one guy sticks out from the rest, and he's going to be popular in cash games, at least as news stands. But yeah, it's a weird slate in that way. And then also we have sort of that receiver. It's the most, I don't know, every elite receiver is on this slate. We have
There's
6 guys.
I was going to say 6 or 7 guys over 8,000.
Yeah, 6 or 7 guys over 8,000. And I wouldn't say that one really stands out. So that's going to be interesting because guys who would normally be popular, like they can't all be popular.
Right.
So picking that spot's going to be pretty tough. As far as the games go, yeah, I'll let you break that down. Sort of three stand out from the rest, I would say.
And it's not only the 3 stand out from the rest, but the other 7 are all low total. It's not like usually we got 3 that stand out, 2 in the middle. You and I talked a lot about Miami and Chicago last week. It actually turned out to be really good plays on both sides. Again, would have been great if Joe Mixon hadn't gone crazy. And then we've got 7 games that are not only low, they're under 44 totals. We have a 36.5 point total this week. It's pretty well. There are a lot of teams not scoring points, a lot of teams playing bad offense, some good defenses that impact that too. But yeah, we have 3 games with totals over 48. I think these are pretty clearly going to be the 3 most popular games for stacks and for people, even one-offs. We've got the Jaguars at the Chiefs at 50.5. We have the Browns and the Dolphins. Our Dolphins are back at 48.5. We have Lions and Bears at 48.5. It feels like the Dolphins or the Lions are involved in all these high-scoring games lately. A little bit of really good offense and really bad defense in the Lions case. But we got 3 games up there. What are you finding yourself? Do you find yourself gravitating towards one of those? Are you kind of like a mix and match between the 3? What's your favorite of the higher total games this week?
Yeah, I want to like just one of those games, but I do kind of like all 3 right now. So I'd like to fade that Chiefs game if possible, just because the Chiefs are expensive and they're difficult to stack. But
Yep.
I actually think that game has a pretty good chance of shooting out if the Jaguars can just do a little bit. Mahomes has been unbelievable. I mean, he threw the ball 68 times last week. I mean,
crazy.
Unbelievable for DFS at least. Yeah, crazy. Yep. I believe the 4th most passing attempts in history or something, throwing for over 400 yards again. Kelsey, stands out on this slate. So I don't know if I can fade the Chiefs. I might want to stack that game. I think I like the Dolphins spot a little bit more. Both. I mean, we'll get into that. I guess I can talk about it now.
Yeah.
The Browns.
I love that game.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let you talk about it more. Then I have a few things to say about that game, but I think I was saving the 3rd game for last. Funny to say, but I think the Bears Lions might be my favorite spot.
All right. Nice. I like it. Okay.
Justin Fields, and not necessarily for a full game stack, but I'm going to be back on Fields this week. I mean, he got a big price hike. And again, I think now he gets a home matchup against the Lions, which is one of the best matchups in football.
Yep. Oh, I think we lost Ryan for a second. I'm sure he'll be back in 1 second. It's interesting that he talks about Justin Fields as against Detroit in the worst matchup. Oh, Ryan's back. There we go. That was quick.
Not again. Yeah, not again.
No worries. That was super fast. I was going to ask you, since you brought up Fields, the question I wanted to ask you at the start here. At 6,500 against the Lions, is Fields is the most popular quarterback on the slate by far? And I'm going to answer my own question because Ryan is having a little bit of tech issues. It's interesting with all the attention Fields has had this week. I think it's going to be quarterback is always a spot where, it's so spread out. There's so many options and it's never super popular. But I think that Fields at 6,500, 178 rushing yards last week, the most ever in a regular season game. I don't want to leave out my boy Colin Kaepernick with the most ever for the 49ers against the Packers in a playoff game. I think he had 181 and Fields is at 178, so really close. But you look at the Bears' offense; it's just different. The Bears' offense is different than it was. They have 33, 29, and 32 points the last 3 weeks. Ryan is back with us. Ryan, with Fields, I was saying I think so, but I know that quarterbacks are, they're always pretty spread out. There's so many choices to make. Do you think Fields is this week against Detroit is the most popular quarterback we've seen so far this season? Because I think so.
So the most popular, as in all season.
I think it's gonna be the highest percentage quarterback. I mean, usually quarterback is so spread out, not player, but highest. I mean, just think 6,500 is still a priced up, but still not super expensive. Josh Allen's probably not going to play. Really, you've got Tua at 6,700. They're going to take some rostership away, but I think Fields is going to be really popular. There's been so much hype this week. 180 rushing yards. All the stuff with Mike McDaniel has been all over the news. He had 3 touchdown passes. I just think against Detroit, it's hard not to get away from the fact that he's going to be really popular this week.
Yeah, okay. I guess you're right. He was really popular in cash games last week. Yeah, 50% in a lot of the stuff I played. So you're right. Yeah, he'll probably be that again, if not more. Great matchup against the Lions. I just thought, if you would have said that Tua at home against the Browns is going to be priced the same as Fields, just a few weeks ago, people would have thought you were crazy, right. And now you have people jumping to play Fields, but I don't know. I guess people keep getting sharper. The lobbies are sharper as a whole. It's a great spot for Fields. I was thinking people might look at the Lions and see that game last week against the Packers and think that maybe they shut him down. But I mean, Rodgers, he still threw for the most yards he's thrown for all season. He just threw 3 picks in the end zone. I mean, we saw Fields with his legs last week. This should be a spot where Fields can do it with his arm as well. So yeah, you're probably right. I guess maybe it was just wishful thinking on my part.
Yeah, I actually prefer Tua this week. I think I'm gonna go Dolphins stack there. We will talk about stacks in a second, but yeah, those 3 games stick out pretty significantly. Then we've got 7 games that are over that are under 44-point totals. We got the Vikings Bills 43.5. Obviously, that would be higher if we thought Josh Allen was going to play, but it's looking like he's not going to. He hasn't practiced yet this week. Colts Raiders 42.5. Broncos Titans, last I looked, 36.5. That is absolutely disgusting. Texans Giants 40.5. Saints Steelers 40. Cowboys Packers, which you thought 2 months ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, we got Cowboys Packers, the Sunday America's game or whatever Fox calls it. 43. That's it's pretty wild. I would have thought that'd be a 53 about 2 months ago. And then we had Cardinals Rams, same boat. Like we would have thought 2 months ago, oh my gosh, Cardinals Rams on Sunday afternoon against Packers Cowboys. These are great matchups. That one's 41.5 as the Rams have struggled. Matthew Stafford is questionable. The Rams still play pretty good defense, but their offense has been pretty bad lately. We had that really low scoring game with Tampa Bay last week, so I think everyone remembers that one. Are there any of these games? We talked last week. We liked Chicago and the Dolphins of games that weren't super high totals. Are there any of these games that you find yourself thinking I think this total is a little bit low and I'm going to try and find some players in this game? Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, I'm not so sure. I guess the one game that I want to mention or that's important to mention is the Raiders Colts game because the Raiders are going to have some pretty chalky players in that game. Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller both hit the IR. So We're going to have Mac Hollins for 4,200 and Foster Moreau for 3,200 that are going to be very popular in cash games as things stand. And that will carry over to tournaments as well. And then people will see what Devontae Adams did last week. They'll also factor in that Renfrow and Waller are out. So it looks like a pretty good spot for Adams. So that Raiders spot is important. I don't know though that I really want to stack that spot. I would maybe rather avoid it if it's going to be really popular. I don't know. What do you think about that game?
I can give you a full explanation on how it feels to stack Adams and Carr if you'd like to, because it did not work out very well for me. You can imagine how I felt on the first wide open Adams. I think it was the second touchdown where he was wide ass open. Play. Derek Carr actually hit the ball really. It was a good play, but he went nuts, and then they did nothing in the second half. They were up 17-0 in that game, and then just died. It's just the Raiders are a weird team right now. 3 17-point leads in first halves, and they lost games. It's almost impossible. I think I saw a stat that in the last 40 years, the Raiders have done it 8 times or something like that, and they did it 3 times in the first half of this season. So it's just it's a wild stat. It's almost impossible to do in the NFL to have leads that big. I mean, usually that means you're doing something so right that you're not just going to give up that lead. They did it 3 times. I don't know. Their offense was rolling, and then all of a sudden it died. So I'm a little wary of the Raiders' offense right now. It all makes a lot of sense. I think I'm more likely to play the Moreau and Hollins kind of one-offs in some of my tournaments than I am to stack them right now.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that. What about you, though? Any of these other games? Was there one game for you that you think, oh, this is going to go over?
It's tough. I think it might actually be Vikings Bills for me, but then you look at the Bills defense is really good. Maybe they'll slow it down. I like getting all those skill players in a game where the total is only 43.5. But obviously, Case Keenum, who knows where we're getting there. You want to go Cardinals Rams, but man, that Rams offense is just anemic right now. Their offensive line is bad. If we get John Wolford, you don't want to touch that. If I had to pick one of these games to go over, I think I'd probably go. That's a really good question. I think I'd probably go Texans Giants with the thought that maybe if the Texans can get to just to get to 17 points, that game goes over because they're just so bad. I think the Giants will get some offense rolling. Saquon Barkley, I think, is going to be popular this week. So probably go Texans Giants over, but I wouldn't love all those games have pretty good reasons why they're low totals right now.
Yep, and I think the fact that me and you are really struggling to find other games here, it's going to lead to those 3 we mentioned being very popular. But sometimes you can't get away from it if it's almost a sure thing that, 1 or 2 of those games are going to be the best game to target, then you just got to target it.
Picking the right one-offs from those bottom 7 games is going to be really important this week because there are going to be players that do well in those games. So picking the right ones, you don't necessarily need to get the stacks to do well. You need to get some of those one-offs too. So let's jump into the players. But first, a note from our sponsors at NFL All Day. NFL All Day is the officially licensed digital collectible of the NFL. It's a whole new way to express your fandom by owning the greatest moments from your favorite players and teams. Each moment on NFL All Day features a limited edition video highlight of the greatest plays from the NFL's past or present. From OBJ's iconic one-handed catch to Patrick Mahomes' 5 touchdowns on 5 straight possessions to Brian Urlacher's 85-yard pick six against the Packers, there's truly a moment on NFL All Day for every fan. It doesn't stop at being able to own a collection of your own favorite moments, because NFL All Day rewards collectors for their fandom. You see, NFL All Day collectors have earned a once-in-a-lifetime experiences like literally going on stage in the NFL Draft to announce draft picks and meeting some of the biggest names from the 2022 NFL Draft or the NFLPA Rookie Premiere. What's the best way to get started? Head to NFLAllDay.com to sign up and redeem a free limited edition NFL collectible featuring Patrick Mahomes. Don't miss out on NFL All Day's next generation fan platform and start unlocking rewards and experiences today. So, Ryan, we always start out by talking, who's going to be popular in cash games, who's going to be the chalky plays. I think we've already hit that at quarterback. I think it's Fields and Tua. So let's jump into running back, because I have no idea who's going to be popular running back this week. When I first looked, I kind of thought, maybe Alvin Kamara and Travis Etienne at 7,400, 7,100. Is there a running back? I guess maybe Dameon Pierce at 6,300, because there's nobody else in that range. But is there a running back you think sticks out as like, oh, everybody's going to have this guy this week?
Yeah, I mean, you just hit all three of them, really.
There we go. Perfect.
Yeah. And it'll probably be Kamara and Pierce as the top two, at least as news stands now. Pierce, because, as we've talked about, he's the only one in the 6K range this week, at least the only one that projects decently well. Pierce has seen a huge amount of touches, I believe at least 24 in 3 of the last 4 games. And that's just a lot of volume for 6,300. So he makes sense in cash games. He'll be popular. And then, you mentioned Kamara and Etienne. I think Kamara a little bit more so, just because I think people are worried about Etienne away to Kansas City. Not that they necessarily should be, but I think Kamara just feels a bit safer.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I think a running back will be very spread out this week. There's a lot of studs. I think it's probably Pierce to be most popular, just because, like we said, he's the one guy in there. You're like, oh, as you're scrolling, you're like, oh, he's really good. People are talking about this week. He runs really angry. Everybody likes him. And 6,300 he's been really good. He's earned that love from people. But I think it's probably the most popular there. But I think it's pretty spread out at receiver. There is one receiver that sticks out to me this week as the most popular. I don't know if you'll agree or not, but I think that Amari Cooper just feels underpriced to me at 6,500. We've talked about I think Mac Hollins at 4,200 be pretty popular with Waller and Renfro out, but man, as I was scrolling, you talked about earlier. It's a good point. All the stud receivers are 6 guys over 8,000. Amari Cooper not only in the 7,000 but 6,500 in a game that is one of the 3 games we talked about that has the highest totals. I think it's 6,500. I love the play this week, so I'm going to eat some chalk here, but I think he's going to be really popular.
Yeah, I really like Amari. I think he's going to be popular, but not the most popular in this range.
All right, good. I'd like to hear that. Who's going to be the most popular in this range?
That is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6,900. I don't know. We really like Amon-Ra. We talk about him every week. 9 targets last week, 10 targets the week before. He had kind of a down game last week, but the script went perfectly, basically, for the Lions. I mean, not for the passing game, perfectly to the point where they didn't have to pass. Goff only threw the ball 26 times. They were basically winning the whole game. They didn't have much of the ball, and it was mostly just Rodgers and the Packers chasing. But the spot against Chicago is good for the Lions, and people are looking at that game. They're looking at Fields. Amon-Ra under 7K. I think he'll be the most popular in that range. But you're right. Nothing really stands out too much aside from Mac Hollins chalking cash games.
Yeah, I think you we'll get some Mac Hollins chalk for sure. I think that there's some other guys down that it'll get rostership, but Cooper sticks out to me. I always like Amon-Ra. I do like that spot too. And you're right. With everybody liking Fields and playing Fields so much, he's going to be the obvious run back in that game. With DeAndre Swift is kind of played 10 snaps last week, but gets enough that you're like, oh, he's going to take away some from Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams is kind of boring, but we'll get some rostership there too. But I think you're probably right. I think Amon-Ra makes sense from a game stack perspective. That maybe a lot of people will land on that. Since I think so many people are going to play Fields.
Yeah, and one more thing about Amon-Ra that will keep his ownership sort of boosted up there is no more Hawkinson on that team. Yeah. Reynolds maybe out again. Chark on the IR. You mentioned Swift not getting much playing time or other workload that we would assume. So it's pretty much only Amon-Ra there, and people really like that.
So let's jump into quarterbacks. I think that it's the place to go next. What are you doing game stack wise? It feels like stacking someone from those 3 games is the way to go. But what's your favorite stack? What are you kind of finding yourself falling on? Is it going to be Fields with a receiver? Is it going to be Fields by himself? Is it going to be somebody else? Where are you going with your favorite stack of the week?
Yeah, this is going to be pretty boring. But right now the 3 I'm looking at are Mahomes, Tua, and Fields. So. Yep. I don't know. Obviously, those are the 3 obvious ones. I'm going to let you touch on Tua and the Cleveland game.
Okay.
But I like that spot. I'll talk about Fields because I'm going to stack Fields again. And I made a mistake last week. And I believe I even said it on the podcast that I was only going to single stack Fields. I didn't like the idea of pairing him with 2 pass catchers. And that was clearly a mistake. If you could have paired Fields with Kmet and Mooney and been just fine. And, Mooney got his touchdown early and had plenty of chances to get another one. So I had lineups with just Kmet and lineups with just Mooney. And it totally made sense to play both of them because also pretty much all the cheap tight ends busted. So you don't even really need Cole Kmet to go off all the time, which, I'm always thinking to myself, well, can they both really go off? Fields doesn't really throw for that many yards. It doesn't matter as much when they're priced that cheaply either. Yeah. So I may double stack Fields this week and run it back with Amon-Ra. But yeah, I don't know. Tell me what you think about the Cleveland-Miami game.
Yeah, just to touch on Fields, it's so hard because, like you say, you made a mistake, but then you look up and he threw for 123 yards. So, I know that Kmet scored twice and Mooney scored. So, I don't know. I don't know if I would call it that big a mistake. I think it's hard to double stack a guy who's going to throw for 150 yards. Maybe they'll throw for more this week against the Lions, but it's just tough. I mean, they have to score, but if you're going to do it in a tournament, you're trying to get those guys to score anyway. You're trying to go big anyway. So I get what you're saying, but. Man, it's hard to commit 2 receivers when a guy's throwing for 150 yards. But
it is
obviously it worked last week. Yeah, for me it's Tua. I just love. I mean, the Dolphins' offense is rolling right now. Mike McDaniel's just dealing right now. Tua was 21 of 30 for 302 and 3 touchdowns against the Bears last week. He leads the NFL 9.2 YPA yards per attempt. I mean, just crazy. You've got the best thing I like about. I mean, is everybody knows this, but the best thing about stacking Tua is you just know where the ball's going. It's going to Tyreek. It's going to Waddle. You can try to play both. It gets really expensive fast, but at least with either one. It's not like in the old days where we had Evans and Godwin, and one of them would go off and the other one wouldn't. Tyreek and Waddle can both go off, so you can pick either one. Tyreek gets a ton of targets, a ton of yards. He's on pace to break the all-time receiving record. But Waddle still, I mean, he has 4 straight games of 80+ yards or whatever it is. He has 6 touchdowns on the year. The Browns are 25th in YPA allowed at 7.4. This matches up well. And I've mentioned before, I love running it back with Cooper. You can run it back with Nick Chubb. It gets really expensive really fast. You probably have to go Waddle if you do that. But there's just ways to play here. I think this game is going to shoot out. I love the fact that Tua's throwing so much, throwing so well. He's got Jeff Wilson. He's got Raheem Mostert if he needs to dump it off. There's options there. Gesicki can catch a pass. But I just think that I think their defense is kind of bad too, so it helps get to shootouts. Now, you love a quarterback who's throwing a lot with a defense who's not shutting people down. It just leads to games that are 30-27 or 34-31, and the Dolphins are playing a lot of those games right now.
Yep. I mean, I love this spot too. I'm probably gonna choose it over the Kansas City Jacksonville game.
Talk to me about KC though. Mahomes is 7,900. What are you doing there with him?
I will. I'll add a couple things of why I can't get off that Cleveland-Miami game.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So Cleveland's actually been pretty explosive this year. I mean, Jacoby Brissett is making big plays. I think they're 6th in the league in big plays, which is either 20 plus or 30 yard plays. Jacoby Brissett has thrown a 30+ yard pass in 7 straight weeks, multiple in a lot of those games. He had a 50+ yard pass last week and the week before, Amari is making big plays. So is Peoples-Jones. And the Dolphins defense gives up big plays. So do the Browns defense. Also, the Dolphins defense is one of the best in the league against the run. So you think maybe they could shut down Nick Chubb, and then, it's just going to be a passing game.
Yeah.
So yeah, that spot looks really good to me too.
I already love that you just added to it. So thanks. I appreciate that.
Onto the KC game. The reason why I like this game and why I'm having trouble getting away from it, I think it has a really good chance to shoot out. I mentioned at the start, but not if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play better. Yep. But the Chiefs have given up the most passing touchdowns in the league. I mean, if Mahomes is going to throw that much, Jacksonville is just not going to have a choice. I mean, they're going to have to try to play fast. They have been playing a little bit faster. They're going to have to throw the ball. So, I mean, if they just all their pass catchers are cheap too. So if he just throws a few touchdowns, Mahomes is going to be out there slinging it all game. And another reason to like it is Kelsey stands out as really the only elite tight end. I mean, he's having a great season. 17 more targets last week. I mean, averaging 22 plus Draftkings points through 8 games. Those are crazy numbers for Kelsey. Normally it's hard to, we stay away from KC, or at least I do, because it's hard to stack them. You think it became even harder now that they got Kadarius Toney, Hardman, Valdez-Scantling. I kind of think you can just forget about those guys. I mean, maybe if Mecole Hardman's out, you can look at some of them, but Juju seems, nailed on as Mahomes' second favorite receiver. I mean, 10 catches last week on 12 targets. He's had his best 3 games of the season in the last 3 weeks. So I actually think the KC stack is relatively simple. I would just play Mahomes with Juju, Kelsey, maybe both of them. I think you can fit both of them with some of the value we have. You could even run it back with Zay Jones is cheap, and he gives you leverage off of guys that will be chalky in that range, like Mac Hollins and some other guys that we'll talk about later. I think it's a good spot for Christian Kirk too, and he's even a little bit too cheap, still under 6K. So I really that game is appealing as well, and I'm not going to do it, but the last thing I'll say is if you have an inkling to play a guy like Trevor Lawrence, I think that's doable this week. There's a lot to spend for this week, so. I'm not going to play these cheap quarterbacks, but you could take a chance on someone like Lawrence. He only needs to get you about 25, and you can win tournaments with that.
So that was going to be my next question for you. Is we've talked a lot about KC and Miami. At 5,400, we have Lawrence and we have Jacoby Brissett. I actually kind of like the Jacoby Brissett stack. I think that love that. You go Brissett and Cooper, and you come back with Tyreek, and you can afford it. And people that can't afford Tyreek and drop the wall, if Tyreek goes off, maybe you get an edge there. It's hard to get everybody in. And, Miami is really poor at pressuring the quarterback. They're allowing 7.4 yards YPA. We talked about in these games, get back and forth. You talked about Brissett making big plays. I mean, he was 278. He was 17 to 22 for 278 against Cincinnati. And I only had 1 touchdown pass. But you morph that into 2 or 3, and you keep that efficiency, and you keep the fact they're going to have to score. I think if you want to go cheap, I think it's a week you can play Jacoby Brissett. It's going to be, obviously it's tough with Fields and Tua only 1,000 ahead of him. But in a tournament, I think you can get really interesting. And it allows you to play maybe one more of those expensive running backs, and maybe that's where you get your edge.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. It's tough to click that name. It's tough to click Jacoby Brissett. Yep. But I think it makes a lot of sense this week. Yeah, I agree.
So my last question for you on quarterbacks before we move on to running backs and receivers. If Josh Allen does not play, the Bills have Stephon Diggs. They have Gabriel Davis. They've got Isaiah McKenzie, a lot of weapons. Do you even remotely consider Case Keenum at $5,000?
I can't, Scott. I can't. I mean, can you? Maybe you can try to sell me.
If he was like 4,000, like Ellinger was a couple weeks ago, maybe. But I'd probably try and sell you on it, except for the fact that Brissett and Lawrence are just right above there in games we think they're going to shoot out. I don't think I can go Keenum over those guys, which sounds crazy. I'm talking about Brissett and Trevor Lawrence here. But, first start of the year. He's got great weapons. He's got a great offense to kind of slide into. He's a veteran guy that can get it done. But I just don't think I can get away from the 2 guys that are right above him, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think I can either. And I guess – he's got those weapons, Diggs and Davis. are still priced as though they have Josh Allen as their QB, though, and they're priced, a bit high for a game with a total like this. It's just tough to see Keenum going out there and slinging it around the way that Allen does, playing fast with the pass rate way up there. I mean, you figure he would just try to be more of a game manager, or at least that would be the game plan. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I can get there.
Yeah, I don't think I can either. It's just an interesting thought. We see him so cheap with those weapons. But you're right. If you play it, you got to play it with Diggs, and suddenly you're paying, $8,300 for Stephon Diggs with a quarterback you don't really want to play him with. So let's jump into running backs and receivers. But first, a note from our sponsors at No House Advantage. No House Advantage is changing the game by offering the most dynamic fantasy sports platform available today. Play in pick'em contests versus other people for the shot at winning big cash prizes. Download the app, choose a contest, select your player props, earn points for correct picks, and climb the leaderboard for your shot at hundreds of $1,000s every week. You can also test your skills versus the house and 20x your entry if you hit all your picks. Bet on up to 5 player prop over-unders of the individual player matchups across every major sports league, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, and NASCAR. Sign up with promo code NHAWIRE. That's NHAWIRE at nohouseadvantage.com, or download the app on the app stores to get a first deposit match up to $25. Make sure to check out No House Advantage today and experience daily fantasy sports redefined. It's not just how you play, but also where you play. You don't want to miss out on this. So, Ryan, as we look at the No House Advantage app, we do a quick little thing here to help people out there. It's an over-under contest. I sent you some props from the No House Advantage app. What are a couple of player props this week that you like real quick before we jump back into the DFS slate?
Yeah, I like a couple of them, and I believe we went 100% last week. So let's
nice. I like to
try
hear
to do that again. Yeah, I'm gonna pick 2 guys from the same game. The first one's Justin Fields. I see his number. I believe it was 181 passing yards. Yeah. Well, the Lions have never held a quarterback to that number all season. They've sort of been a great team to pass against. They just gave up a season high in yards to Aaron Rodgers. I know Fields hasn't been great through the air, but I think this is a spot where he can showcase it, actually. So I think that 181 number is a bit low. So I'll take the over on Fields there. And then in the same game, run it back with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think his number was 71. I think it might be a little bit down because of the 2 recent games, but we spoke a little bit about Amon-Ra, and they don't have Hawkinson there now, and they're probably going to need to pass a little bit more this game. They have other wide receivers banged up. I just think everything will go to Amon-Ra, and I think he can beat that 71 number pretty easily. So 2 guys in that game, over on Fields and over on Amon-Ra. What about you?
I like those right there. I had those flagged also. My favorite one, it's not gonna be any surprise to you or anybody that's listened to the first half hour of this, is I love Amari Cooper over 62.5 receiving yards. I think that number is way too low. I think he'll hit a big play. I think he'll hit a lot of kind of in between medium plays too. I love him to go way over that number. I think that number is just too low. That would be my obvious play there. And then I'm going to go with Chris Olave over 68.5 receiving yards. This guy is we got a situation where all the, Michael Thomas is not playing. He's the guy. If you look at the 20 with 30 targets the last 3 weeks, and he makes big plays. So, give me anyone that, is getting a lot of targets combined with the fact that he hits some explosive ones. I love that when I'm betting over. I know that he was at 71 yards last week. That would have been slightly over 106 a couple weeks ago. I only had 52 against the Raiders, but I like the spot here. I think that he's been very consistent. He's obviously a target monster, and give me that at over 68.5 receiving yards. And I'm taking that one. Taking that one to No House Advantage Bank. So we appreciate the No House Advantage sponsorship all year long. It's a really fun game to play. So definitely check that out. Go to the website or download the app. Ryan, expensive running backs. We mentioned before the mid-range is a little bit gone. A lot of these guys have been priced up. Josh Jacobs and Travis Etienne are now in the 7,000s. They're 7,600, 7,100. Kamara 7,400. And we have 4 guys over 8,000 to mention. I don't have Jonathan Taylor in here. I'm not playing. I want to see if he's what the injury looks like before I commit a bunch of money to him. But Saquon Barkley 8,600, Derrick Henry 8,300, Nick Chubb 81, Dalvin Cook at 8,000. What are you doing in this range? Because there are a plethora of options to pick from.
Yeah, this range is tough. I really like Saquon and Derrick Henry. I was hoping you might be able to, I don't know, sort of push me in one direction, because I don't really want to play both guys. I mean, maybe I will, but I usually like to just pick one of these expensive running backs. Yeah. So Saquon, obviously, it's just a really good spot at home against the Texans. We've talked about this Texans run defense. They might be the worst in football. At least they have been in recent weeks. So obviously, it's a great spot for Barkley. He catches passes too. But Derrick Henry's been really good recently. I'm not sure. I think Tannehill looks like he's going to be back. So that might be
hopefully, because that was death for their offense last week. And Henry still did well.
Yeah, I was starting to question whether Tannehill or Willis is better for Henry's DFS performance. Just because with Willis,
you'd think it'd be Willis just because it opens up lanes, but man, it's hard to watch. But yeah, 17 for 115 last week. Yeah.
It's hard to watch, but he's just been so good, Henry. And I mean, I think with Tannehill back, he'll be catching passes. So I don't know. I like both those spots. Can't really decide which one I like more. The Broncos have given up huge games to running backs. I mean, we just saw what Etienne did to them. That's clearly going to be the Titans' game plan. I don't know. I always feel good about Henry in these spots, and he just has such a big ceiling.
Yeah, I actually those two stick out to me definitely above the other ones. I like, that I am president of the Nick Chubb fan club, but I do like Barkley and Henry more this week. Dalvin Cook's 8,000, and the Buffalo run D has leaked a little bit the last couple of weeks, but man, I guess the selling point on Cook would be nobody's going to play him at 8,000 this week. As an underdog against the Bills, but so the selling point there would be it's the lowest you'll get him all year, maybe all year long. It's just I don't think anybody's going to go there this week at the price. But Barkley just sets up so well. I think it's my favorite play this week at the spot. Second running back touches, getting 24 touches a game. Coming off a bye is great for Saquon too. It's just a great game script. It's a great matchup. We mentioned before of those lower games, this is the one I would pick to go over. So I think it's a few more points than everybody thinks. Houston is allowing 5.7 yards per carry. Like I had to look that up. Like it's almost impossible to allow that much into a running back. They've allowed 13 touchdowns to running back. They just can't stop anybody in the run. And I think we talked about a bunch last year. When you get a team that can't stop the run by this point of the season, it's a pretty clear fact they just can't stop the run. It's not a fluke. It's not a big play at this point. They're allowing a lot of big plays. I would never argue against Henry. You mentioned that the Broncos run D has been really rough lately, especially they've allowed over 5 yards per carry the last 4 games, but like Houston's doing that and more over the whole season. I think I lean Barkley a little bit. I think the ceiling's a little bit high with Barkley this week. The floor is probably better with Henry. They just hand the ball. I think he has all their touchdowns over the last 3 weeks too. I don't think the Titans have anyone else with a touchdown besides Henry, which is almost impossible too. But give me Barkley. It's really expensive, 8,600, but I love him this week. I think it's a gigantic ceiling game.
Yeah, I think you sold me on Barkley as well. If I had to pick one, I'll just say it was for 2 reasons. One, I definitely like him coming off a bye. That's good to bring up. And thinking back, the Texans against Josh Jacobs, it was the worst run defense I've ever seen. I'm not exaggerating. And it was the worst run defense I've ever seen. And then the week after that, they allowed over 300 to the Titans. So yeah, I got to be on Barkley too.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, we loved Henry that week against Houston. I mean, there was a reason he ran for 200 plus yards himself. So I just think at this point, like it's a personnel, it's everything put together. Houston just can't stop the run. So in the 7,000s, you just mentioned Josh Jacobs. He's 7,600 against Indy. Indy is terrible, but they actually play pretty good run defense. They're like a 3.8, 3.9 yards per carry allowed. He's been quiet the last couple weeks, but he's still priced up kind of when he was running really well. We got Kamara at 7,400. ATN has just been red hot. 28, or he had another 109 yards last week, 2 touchdowns, over 100 rush yards each last week with 5 touchdowns in that stretch. Do you have a favorite among these 3 guys? I think that, the thing with ATN, maybe he gets some passes this week. If they're trailing, maybe they throw the ball to him. But I think Kamara and ATN are going to be really popular this week too.
Yep, I think so too. Actually, Josh Jacobs is not going to be unpopular either.
Yeah. Okay.
So he'll be relatively popular just because of, we mentioned those guys being out for the Raiders and
home favorite. Everybody kind of gravitates towards that. We talked about that last week with Mixon. It's kind of saying like hadn't been great, but home favorite can run the ball. And the Raiders have been horrible, but you could see a game script where they could roll in that game and win by double digits. Yeah.
So I'm not going to play a popular-ish Josh Jacobs for 7,600. I just can't do it. I remember all the times where you hated to click Josh Jacobs' name when he was 5,500, and now he's priced near these other guys, near enough to Derrick Henry, where I just couldn't do it. I like Kamara the most, to answer your question. I like ATN too, but if I had to pick one, it'd be Kamara. I think it's a good matchup against Pittsburgh. I think he catches passes. Yeah, I don't know.
I'd probably lean ATN just because I think the dude is just friggin' awesome. I love watching him play, and I think they'll use him a little more in the passing game to stick them behind. But I wouldn't argue against Kamara either. It's a good.
That's
good
the thing, Scott. Yeah, no, you hit it. If they were to use Etienne more in the passing game, man, I want to be all over him. So yeah, you might be right about that. You think they would start to use him, and you think they might have to use him a little more in the passing game. I think really like.
I think it'll be more your second point. I think they're going to have to use him this week. I think they're going to be trailing. They're going to have to open it up, and I think it's just as you get rolling and Chris Jones starts rushing Lawrence, I think it's an easy just dump off and try and hit a big play with ATN. Real quick in the mid range, we mentioned it's kind of gone this week. We mentioned Dameon Pierce 6,300 is going to be pretty popular just because he's the only guy in here. 93% of their backfield touches last week, 27 for 139, didn't score, but obviously a big game. Nice matchup. The Giants will run on for big yards per carry by ATN in week 7. Kenyon Drake got them in week 6, so good spot here. So I think we're on the same page that we like Pierce 6,300. What else do you do in this range? Is it Tony Pollard? Is it Jamal Williams? Is it Devin Singletary? What the heck else do you in this range? Because it's pretty barren.
If Zeke Elliott plays, I don't think I could do Pollard. And
he's not. I don't want to
play.
He's 6,500 too. He's not that cheap. Where it's if he plays half the game and hits one, you're great. I mean, it's 6,500. It's not that cheap.
Right. It's not something I'm going to do. I don't think I'm going to play any of these guys. To answer your question,
is that include Pierce, or you mean with?
No, I'm going to have some Pierce. Going to have some Pierce. It just makes too much sense. If he's really that much better than this whole range, I'm not saying that he is, but I kind of think he is, I guess. I'm going to have some Pierce. I don't know. Is there anyone below him? I guess there's one guy. I'll just go all the way down.
Okay.
And it's a stretch. It's not, I really don't want to play this guy, but I can see an argument for playing a $5,100 Darrell Henderson. That's pretty cheap. If he was, we've seen him at a guy that catches 4 or 5 balls at times. He's clearly the number one back there. They just don't have an offensive line and don't have much of an offense, but I don't know. Again, I said it's a stretch. You got to give me somebody in this 5K range, or I don't know.
Yeah, Henderson had 12 carries last week to lead the Rams, but it was still 12 carries, and I don't know if Stafford's going to play. I don't think I want to mess with that. My guy here would be Jamal Williams at 5,900. I think that is very clear that the Lions coaching staff and the Lions medical staff don't think DeAndre Swift is healthy. He played 10 snaps last week. That's nothing. That's not even 10 touches. That's 10 snaps. And I know when he's in there, they give him the ball and he's effective. I think he had 50 yards in those 10 snaps. But Jamal Williams had 24 carries last week. I know they were leading the Packers, and he's not. I mean, he's 24 for 81, so he's not great. But when he plays a lot, he usually scores touchdowns. He has 4 multi-touchdown games this year. I think this is a game that's going to be back and forth a little bit. It depends. The game script could mess him up if the Bears get out to a lead and Fields is rolling. Maybe he's a little bit problem. But I think that he's just the guy right now, and he's the goal line guy at 5,900. I think he's the one player in here that I think I could see myself going towards, just based on usage, based on the fact that I think Swift is pretty much not going to play anywhere near even halftime snaps for a while. I think that if you're playing 10 snaps, it's a pretty good sign you're nowhere near being ready.
I'm totally on board with that, actually.
And by the way, if you're going to play DeAndre Swift 10 snaps, just sit him and let him get healthy. I think playing 10 snaps is stupid.
Yeah, I agree. But I guess one thing it does is makes people not want to play Jamal Williams as much.
It does, yeah.
Forget, and everybody listening, forget everything I said about Darrell Henderson. I'm not playing Darrell Henderson this week. I would play Jamal Williams though. Yeah, everything you said makes perfect sense. And the Bears have actually been pretty bad against the run this year for the most part, one of the worst teams in the league. And you mentioned Jamal Williams gets all the goal line stuff. I'm just thinking of what I'm going to do. And I've been talking about Bears stacks and having Amon-Ra as a run back. Well, I mean, why wouldn't I just change some of those to Jamal Williams. So yeah, I'm glad you talked about Williams.
So let's jump into receivers. But first, note for our sponsor at Monkey Knife Fight. Football is officially back on Monkey Knife Fight with all the NFL action you're looking for. And if college football is more your speed, they've got plenty of that too. On Monkey Knife Fight, there's no sharks, no salary caps, and no math. It's just easy to play, easy to win, daily fantasy player props. Join now at monkeyknifefight.com. Get your first game free, then use promo code RWNFL to get your first deposit matched instantly up to $100. So what are you waiting for? Join Monkey Knife Fight today. So, Ryan, we've talked about the expensive receivers. We've teased this a bunch. There are a lot of guys over 8,000. Tyreek is 9,100. Cooper Kupp, 9,000. Justin Jefferson, 8,800. Devontae Adams, 8,700. Stephon Diggs, 8,300. DeAndre Hopkins at 8,000. So we've talked a lot about it and how many guys there are. Who are you going to play in this range? Obviously, it depends who you stack and all that. But do you have a favorite receiver in this really popular group of studs?
It's tough to say favorite, but kind of. I guess I'll just tell you how I narrowed it down. I mean, starting at the bottom with Hopkins, just going to cross him off in that low total matchup against Jalen Ramsey. Going up to Diggs, I don't want to play him with Case Keenum. Jefferson across in that same game. I guess I'm just going to be off that game. I'm not. Jefferson could obviously smash, but I kind of think that game might be a little slower with Keenum, and I don't know if Jefferson has a huge ceiling in that spot. The Bills defense is usually pretty good against the pass. So that leaves Tyreek, Kupp, and Devontae Adams. Adams is a tough one because, we mentioned that Renfro and Waller are out. So Adams looks pretty good. I'm just not sure I want to play Derek Carr. And I guess maybe I could one-off Adams, but I think that stack is going to be, more popular than it should be, like Carr, Adams, and either Hollins or Moreau. And I'm not saying it's a bad stack. Like I considered it, and I'm still sort of considering it, but I think I'm going to be off that. So that leaves Tyreek and Kupp, probably the best two receivers. Tyreek, big salary bump on Tyreek. First time he's been over $9K. We've spoke about that game though as arguably our favorite game. The Browns allow big plays. The Dolphins are a big play, explosive offense. So yeah, I'm going to be on Tyreek, I think, for the most part, but I do like Cooper Kupp only if Stafford plays, obviously. I guess I didn't see that Stafford, appears pretty doubtful.
Yeah, he's in the concussion protocol as of Wednesday, and with all the Tua stuff, I think they have they're pretty strict on that protocol.
Well,
so he still might play. So I think we'll know on Sunday. But
that would be very easy then. I mean, I would never play Cooper Kupp if Stafford wasn't playing. I mean, you just
not at 9,000, that's for sure.
No, not at 9,000. You just can't do that. So that would be nice, actually. Then I guess Tyreek and maybe Devontae Adams, unless, I don't know, maybe, what do you think? You probably have, I don't know. I was thinking you might like Jefferson, but I don't know.
You broke that down really well, so I won't go too much deeper. You broke that down by guy really well. Mine would be, I agree. I just probably would go Jefferson for Adams. I'd go Hill and Jefferson. I just think that if you look at the Bills, they are pretty good, but they've been pretty average against wide receiver ones, and Jefferson is obviously that. Another 13 targets last week, 7 for 115, finally got in the end zone again. We both called Jefferson and Hill touchdowns last week for the first time in a long time. They did both score. Jefferson has 98 yards in 5 straight. I think Buffalo's going to score enough to make this a game where Jefferson's going to have to be involved. I think that Case Keenum in that offense, I think will be okay. I'm not playing him, not thinking they're going to go off, but I think there'll be enough scoring that I think Minnesota's going to have to throw the ball a little bit. So give me Jefferson over Adams and over Kupp, but Tyreek, my top play here. He's the most expensive one for a reason. He has 140 yards 5 times this year. That is a crazy number. Only Justin Jefferson has more than 2 in the entire panel. He has 3. Nobody else has more than 2. Tyreek has 5. The targets are everywhere. He finally got in the end zone last week. Cleveland is bottom 5 in yards per catch to wide receivers. I think this game's going to go over the total. I think it's a great shootout game. And Tyreek just seems, I think he'll be the most popular in this range, but he's 9,100, so he's not going to be that popular. So I think he sticks out. And give me Jefferson second. And then as we go lower in receivers, we've got Jalen Waddle kind of by himself in this range, 7,600. If you're playing Tua, no problem with Waddle for me. Another good game last week, 5 for 85 on 7 targets. Almost a huge game too. Tua underthrew it, what should have been like a 65-yard touchdown pass. Like if it's 2 yards deeper, Waddle has a massive, massive game. And again, we talked about it enough with this game. Great matchup, great game script, 85 yards in 4 straight. So I think Waddle's very playable. But talk to me about the mid-range of wide receiver. Say 5,000, 7,000. I think there's a lot of choices here. We're going to need some choices here this week because there are not a lot of running backs to play in this price range. You have to pay up at running back. So who do you like in this range? We talked about Amon-Ra. We've talked about Amari Cooper. So I guess we don't need to talk about them again. But who else do you like in this range?
Yeah, obviously love Amon-Ra and Cooper.
Yeah.
One thing about Waddle, I think Waddle is a great option this week from a leverage perspective. He's the only guy in that 7K range, kind of a dead range, and he's going to be less popular than Tyreek Hill, less popular than some of these other guys. It's a price increase for Waddle as well. This is the most expensive we've ever seen him. People just aren't going to want to click that name at that price. So I think great leverage option. Looking below at some of the guys we haven't talked about as much, Juju would be my next favorite to answer your question. I just think that's going to be a good game environment, and Juju's been great. 18 plus fantasy points in 3 straight weeks, lots of targets, at least 8 targets in 5 out of the last 6 weeks. Like if you're getting 8 targets a week or more from Patrick Mahomes, that's pretty good for fantasy football, So yeah, I like Juju. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. It's hard to get away from Juju. I worry a little bit because the volume is just so insane with them. That like the reason he has so many targets because Mahomes threw the ball 68 times last week. But you look at the last 3 weeks: 5 for 113, 7 for 124, 10 for 88. Your point about getting targets from Mahomes is the whole key of this whole thing. That was a great point. The Jags are not great against slot receivers too, so that even boosts them up a little bit. It's hard to go away from him at 6,000 in that offense, but I like Chris Olave at 6,800 against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is allowing the most points per game to opponent wide receiver ones on the season. So we always talk about Pittsburgh at defense, but they've been thrashed by wide receiver ones this year. He was 6 for 71 on 9 targets on Monday night. I just think he's their only guy, and I think he's really talented and skilled. So I like him a lot this week, and I don't think he'll be that popular, stuck between St. Brown and Cooper on the price list. So I think that he kind of slides through as like, I just can't get to him because I'm going to play Amon, I'm going to play Cooper. It's hard for people to get to Olave at 6,800. I also like Christian Kirk again. He was really good for us last week. We talked about how much we liked him. We felt underpriced last week at 5,500. He had 76 yards and a touchdown and 9 targets. I think he's a great run back in this game. Kansas City's going to score. Jacksonville's going to have to throw the ball. 5,900. He had 31% of his team targets last week. So I think Kirk is a really nice play if you need to save some money at 5,900 also. I want to ask you, what are you doing with the Pittsburgh receivers? Are you playing either of these guys? Deontay Johnson is down to 5,800, under 6,000. It's been a really weird year for him. He hasn't topped 60 yards since week 3, but the targets are still huge, just bad targets. Has not scored a touchdown in the year, Ryan. Deontay Johnson has not been in the end zone. We're at week 10. And then we got George Pickens at 5,000. I think people have been talking about him this week with Chase Claypool getting traded. Brutal game his last game out, though. Before the bye, goose egg on 3 targets. Some people played him that week, too. I know season-long leagues, he was in a lot of lineups for the 0 points. You talked about Mooney at 5,500, so he's in this range, too. But either Pittsburgh receiver, do you find yourself moving to them?
Yeah, I kind of like Pickens. I think just as far as Pickens versus Deontay, I mean, you nailed it. It feels like Pickens has a higher ceiling.
I think so too.
And for $800 cheaper, I think that's where I go. And you know what? It actually makes sense because you convinced me again about Olave. So that's an interesting little mini stack right there. That's the biggest reason why I like doing this podcast. You turn me on to things that, you can only look at so much, and there's spots that sort of are just blind spots, or maybe you don't look at. And yeah, that spot for Olave looks really nice. I was planning on playing Kamara in some lineups. I cannot play Kamara and play Olave instead. If I do that, then maybe you use a guy like Pickens, as you mentioned. That spot's not going to be very, very popular. So both those guys can probably offer a little bit of leverage. I think that makes a lot of sense.
And since we're talking about games in Chicago and Pittsburgh, it goes without saying this is a time of year where definitely check the weather report on Sunday morning. Obviously a lot of these plays could get different if suddenly you get. I don't really worry about that much about weather, but you get a lot of wind. I worry about that. Obviously, a lot of rain. You worry about that too a little bit, but mostly for me, it's wind in the passing game. So make sure we're time of year. We're just at a general warning. We're in November. Make sure you check weather on kind of those East Coast and North outside games. What about cheap receivers? We've talked about McCole Hardman. It sounds like he's a little banged up this week. He's 4,500. We've talked about a couple other names that you mentioned. Zay Jones. You're talking about your Kansas City stack. Mac Hollins is going to be popular this week, 4,200 with Waller and Renfro in the IR. Is there anybody else down here aside from, say, Zay and Mac Hollins that you find yourself kind of moving towards?
Yeah, a few guys, actually. We briefly mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones.
I like that one.
I like him. Yeah. Here's an interesting stat. He's caught a 37-yard pass in 3 straight weeks. So
that's definitely an interesting one. You don't get that very often.
Yeah. We know that Peoples-Jones is a deep threat, and for 4,300, really all it takes is a 50-yard touchdown. So I definitely like Peoples-Jones. Paired with Tyreek Hill, if you're not going to use Amari Cooper. And then one other guy that might sort of get forgotten about this week after he was really popular last time, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. He really let me down. Maybe you too, 2 weeks ago. I was in some good spots, and all of my important lineups had Wan'Dale, and he put up 3.5 fantasy points, but this is a pretty good spot. He's, sort of their number one wide receiver, promising rookie, home against the Texans, and not going to be really popular with all these other guys that we mentioned. So I don't mind that either. Who sticks out for you?
Yeah, it was Peoples-Jones for me just in this game. I think it's a really nice, cheap piece of this game at 4,300. 15 targets last 3 games on a lot of snaps. We talk a lot about when we get someone down here cheap, you're hoping for a big play. But most more than anything, I want my guy to be on the field all the time. And he's played a lot of snaps, 70-plus yards in 3 straight games. No touchdowns either. So maybe we can get him in the end zone. Obviously, Hollins. I do like the Wan'Dale call too. You mentioned that doing the podcast helps you get some new names. Helps me also. I think I'd kind of forgotten about Wan'Dale, but I do like. I mentioned it earlier. I like the Giants Texans game to go over 4,700 for Wan'Dale. I think works really well. I think he's going to become a big piece of their offense in the second half, and they need big pieces. I mean, they're still relying on Darius Slayton, and obviously Saquon is really good, but they need someone to catch passes. And Wan'Dale's a guy who does have a legit ceiling, and at 4,700, I think that plays really. And I like him coming out of the bye too. I think that you like to think that their offensive coordinator room during the bye week figured out ways to get their most dynamic receiver the ball in his hands in the second half. So I really like a guy like that coming out of the bye. I like rookies coming out of the bye too. I think that you kind of build in that first half, and then maybe you get to they're trying to try and scheme ways to get him the ball. So I do like that play. It's a really good call from you. I think I'm gonna move to some Wan'Dale in some of these lineups too.
Great points. Yeah, I actually sorry, I have one other guy.
Go for it.
This range is actually kind of loaded. I have to bring this guy up because I will actually roster him, and that's Khalif Raymond, and that's if Jamal Reynolds is out. I think we got a little bit unlucky last week with Khalif Raymond just because Goff only had to throw the ball 26 times. It wasn't the script that it could have been. But if Jamal Reynolds is out, and I mentioned Hockenson anymore. Josh Reynolds, sorry. Yeah. If Josh Reynolds is out and no Hockenson, that's cheap for a guy that has big play upside. We've seen Raymond catch plenty of deep balls. And if he's going to be on the field all the time, like you just mentioned, we want these guys to be on the field. I mentioned that I'm going to be playing Fields, so it would just make sense for me to play Fields with Khalif Raymond. So, yeah, I had to bring that up.
To your point on Raymond, he's played 94% of the team dropbacks in the last 4 games. So I think you mentioned on the field a lot, can hit a big play. I did have him noted in here, so I'm glad you brought him up. 4,400, another cheap piece of a high-scoring game. I've actually got a hard out here. I got to jump in like 5 minutes, so we're going to go tight end really quick. We're going to tight end really quick. We've talked about Kelsey at 700. I think obviously the standout play here, but obviously really expensive. Down in the cheaper range, I'm just going to give you 3 names that I like, and I think probably I'll be playing on most of my teams. You mentioned Moreau, so I'm not going to bring him up, but Pat Freiermuth at 4,200, 16 targets the last 2 weeks. I think the price is really nice here still. 8 for 75 and 457 last 2 weeks. Dalton Schultz, I actually still like when Dak Prescott plays and will play this week. He has 12 targets the last 2 weeks. Green Bay has been really good against tight ends this year, so a little muted there. But I think 3,800 is a good price for Schultz. And Greg Dulcich at 3,400 with Denver. This Denver Tennessee game is just disgusting. It's horrible. We haven't even talked about it very much at all, aside from Derrick Henry. But the first three games, Dulcich has played on the year: 2 for 44 and a touchdown, 6 for 51, 4 for 87. He ran around on 90% of Denver dropbacks last week before the bye. I think that Dulcich is going to be the guy coming out of the bye. I think he's going to play a lot. I think he'll see some plays, and they get 3,400. He does enough to get there at the price.
Yep. We can go through this quickly. I don't have much to add to that. Dulcich is the guy that I was going to mention. Okay. Foster Moreau is going to be the chalk in cash games. So, if news stands the way it is, just play Foster Moreau in cash games. The last thing I'll mention, we've talked about Dolphins stacks. Mike Gesicki is playable. I think some people might think he's not playable just because you see 2 targets last week. You see these, 4-point game, 4 points, 5 points, 1 point. But he can see 7 targets and catch a few touchdowns, and he could easily do what Cole Kmet did last week. And I'm more so reminding myself this because we're going to play these other tight ends in this range, and they can all score, 8 points. That happens all the time. And Gesicki could easily score 18. So if you're stacking that game, it makes a lot of sense to put him in there with Tyreek and Tua.
Yeah, that's a good point. You talk about the low-scoring games. We just have 3 touchdowns the last 4 weeks. So they do, when you get to the red zone, they do sometimes look for Gesicki. I think that's tight ends. I mean, I think those are the names going to play. And then if you go up, I think you just go to Kelsey. TJ Hawkinson's played really well last week, 9 targets, 70 yards, but he's 5,300. He played a lot, though. So if you wanted to get there, but he's a little pricey for me. I think I would drop down to the cheaper guys. Real quick on defense. We got to play one. We got to talk about them. I have 2 or 3 that I like this week, but who do you like on defense this week? Real quick, because I do have to jump. Sorry.
Yeah. For cash games, people are going to be looking at the $2,700 Arizona Cardinals at the Rams. That will be the chalk if Stafford's out. So you just go there. Some people will go all the way down to the Vikings, and that's fine too, especially if Josh Allen's out. So you just play one of those defenses in cash games.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Those are the 2 that I had listed. I had Arizona at 2,700, especially if no Stafford, and then Vikings. I think people will just be like, I'm just going to play someone against a backup quarterback and call it a day at min price at 2,200. You can save a lot of money there. The only other one that I will mention, probably my favorite one, I really like Tennessee at 3,200. Denver has allowed 3+ sacks. Usually I say multi-sacks with my stats. They've allowed 3 sacks or more in 6 of their last 7 games. Russell Wilson is taking a ton of sacks. So I do think Tennessee will get after him a little bit. I think that, it's a low scoring game. With low scoring comes a lot of defense. I think that game gets weird. And you look at Tennessee stacks, or sacks. Denver gives up so many, but Tennessee has 4, 3, 3, 3, 3 the last 5 weeks. That's what it's 16 sacks the last 5 weeks. If I'm doing my really quick math well, I think anytime you give me a game where one team's getting a lot of sacks, one team's giving up a lot of sacks, I like sacks turn into big plays. Russell can make some mistakes. So I think everybody's going to have Arizona. I think I'm going to pay up a little bit to Tennessee at 3,200. I think that's what I'm going to go with my main defense.
Well, that's a perfect way to end the podcast because I've made a few lineups already, and on only one lineup did I use a defense over the Arizona Cardinals, and that was the Titans.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it stuck out to me as 3 pretty obvious plays. Even the most expensive defense this week, I don't fully love. So I think it's a week where I'm going to play either go all the way down, go middle down, or go kind of up or down with Tennessee at 3,200. So Ryan, I appreciate you jumping on as always, and we appreciate everybody listening to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Sorry, I rushed through defense a little bit there. I do have to jump real quick, but appreciate everybody listening. Thanks to No House Advantage for their sponsorship all year on the podcast. Really appreciate that. Other than that, we'll be at you next week for Week 11. We say the season's flying, but we really are. We're in mid-November now, so appreciate everybody listening. Hope everybody has a really good fantasy week. Again, if you have any questions or anything you want to talk about, hit us up on Twitter. Ryan is at Ryan Belongia. Belongia is Belongia. I am at Scott Jenstad. Jenstad is Jenstad. We'll be on there. As injuries happen, other stuff happens. We'll be chatting football there. Other than that, hope everybody has a fantastic week. Back to you next week. Good luck with your lineups and take care.
Thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.